Hey folks, hope you're all doing well. So if you've been around the firearms or training community for long enough, you've probably heard of the phrase dry fire or dry practice. This is the practice of using a firearm to practice, of course, without live ammunition. So what does this do for us? Well, it allows us to practice the majority of things you can do with a firearm, with the notable exceptions of recoil control or understanding what the sights do when the gun recoils with live fire. Now, the other benefit of this is that it allows us to get a lot more repetitions in, and repetition is the mother of all skill. The more you can do, the better, as far as your performance is concerned. And being able to do that conveniently and easily at home without having to spend the time or money going to a range can be instrumental in getting better. So there's a few things we have to have in place to dry practice, one, safely, and two, effectively. The first one is going to be determining what the safest direction at your location is going to be. We want to ensure that if we fail to clear our firearm properly, that there is the least consequence if the gun goes off. We're going to do everything we can to avoid that. However, we must acknowledge that we are humans and we are capable of error. Okay? In my case, I do not have brick walls, so I can't rely on any of the walls in my house to stop this. I am utilizing a corner, so I have the most structure in that corner, being wood. This particular corner faces the direction of least consequence around me. It faces towards a gap between houses into a tree line, so I have another safety layer there. And in addition to that, because I have body armor, I've put my plate carrier with my rifle plates up raised to the level that I practice at. They're slightly overlapped, so there's no gap. And I understand not everybody's going to have that, and we'll talk about that. The next thing we want to have is a robust sterilization procedure. And when I say sterilization, I'm referring to ensuring there is zero live ammunition either in the firearm, the magazines, or in the area that you're going to be practicing in. Now, ideally, live ammunition would never enter the room that you're going to be dry practicing in. But I don't think that's realistic for most people. It's not realistic for me, and I've developed a process for this. So what I have here is just an extra Rubbermaid tub. You'll notice it's kind of big, and what I do is I put my spare magazine and my carry magazine into here, and then when I clear the gun, that round goes in here as well from the chamber. And then I snap this lid shut, and I'll set this on the floor outside of the room I'm practicing in. When I walk back in, I close the door. I announce that I'm dry practicing. If my wife's home, I'll let her know. And then I re-clear that pistol or rifle that I'm using for that session. This gives me 2 chances to clear the firearm. I physically remove the ammunition, and if for some reason it didn't get all out the first time, I will restart. I will re-clear the gun, remove anything. I check my body, anywhere that I would carry live ammunition, and that gets isolated outside of this room. This does not come back into play until I'm completely done and all of my dry practice tools have been put away, whether those be magazines, targets, etc. So speaking of tools, we're going to cover those next. You don't need much to dry practice. Most of the tools are not necessary, but they can be useful. So having dedicated targets is nice. All you really need is an aiming reference that's in that safest direction. In my case, I just cut up a pickle juice box, and I just put a couple aiming references on there. I just circle for the thoracic, a little square for the ocular cavity, and this fits within what I've designated the safe boundaries to aim at. Other useful things for dry practice are going to be things like a blue gun. This one is painted yellow, of course, so that it is more obvious that it is a chunk of plastic. There's no way to manipulate this. Nothing moves. It can't fire. This is the most freeing tool as far as being able to aim in multiple directions or do practice with other people involved. I have some magazines in here. For example, for my rifle, in this case, I've removed the spring and follower so I can manipulate the action without it locking open. This one I've left them because sometimes I use dummy rounds to practice. If you have things like tools from Mantis, those can be useful. These are a more significant investment, and frankly, I don't think they're at all necessary, but they can be beneficial. Probably not the first thing I would buy. And then the next thing is going to be, of course, magazines for my pistol that I practice with, and things like inserts. So in this case, this is a dummy round. and this is part of the barrel block system. These are inserts that go into your magazine and stop it from locking your slide open so you can rack your slide as if it had ammunition or you were reloading, etc. Now you'll notice that I store my magazines completely empty. There's no dummy rounds, whether they're plastic or brass or anything. This is because sometimes magazines get used for live fire and dry practice. And so when I get back from a live fire session, I will completely empty these magazines to the point I can actually touch the follower, and then I will put them with my dry practice tools. This is to ensure that should I be doing, say, malfunction practice at the live fire range and that top round happens to be a dummy round, there's the potential there's still live ammo under this. And when we're manipulating the gun for dry practice, we could load live ammo in the gun. We don't want that, so I never store them with anything like this in there. I check these every single time that I utilize them for dry practice. A moment ago, I mentioned the barrel block. Barrel block is particularly useful when you don't have a dedicated backstop, such as rifle or pistol armor. So a barrel block is a pretty simple device. It's a plastic rod, and this was actually 2 sections long. You see these notches. You can cut this to the length of your firearm, and what you do is with your slide locked open, and you don't have to disassemble your gun, this gets inserted through the chamber all the way through the firearm, and then you can close your action, whether that be your rifle bolt or your pistol slide. This completely fills the chamber, and you'll notice there's no rim. What's cool about this is now you can rack the slide, and this won't get pulled out. And so that allows this to remain in place for the entirety of your practice, and you can still manipulate the slide like you would. This also completely prevents any type of ammunition, live or dummy ammos, from getting chambered, which means it is impossible to fire that gun. And now being there's no rim to get this pulled out on its own, there's no chance of you cycling anything in there. Pretty cool. And this also allows you to do things like lateral transitions, meaning moving between 2 targets, left to right or right to left. And your gun at this point is essentially inert. We're still going to do everything else we can as far as backstop safe direction, but it gives you a little more freedom as far as having an extra layer of safety when you're doing your dry practice. Okay, finally, and this is just as important as everything else, is having a rearming procedure. This is the procedure by which you make your gun back into usable condition so that if you need it that day, it is ready to be used. A car with no gas doesn't do you much good. A gun without ammunition just is useless. So in my case, my procedure is that I would put away all of my targetry and all of my dry practice tools. I'm essentially re-clearing the gun, and I'm re-sanitizing all of my dry practice space. It'll end up just like this. Again, there's no aiming references. All of the tools are put away. Nothing that would make me think I'm dry practicing is left out. At that point, I would then go say I am done with dry practice. Take a deep breath, and then I'll go retrieve my tub of live ammo from outside the room. I come back inside, I go to the opposite side of my bench, and then I will reload my gun, rearm myself, and then I'm done for the day. Folks, I hope that was useful. Below I'm going to link a code that my friend has for barrel block products. I don't receive anything from that. He does not either, and I'll try and keep that updated. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them below.